Okay, we're recording? Okay.
We are recording.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. We're here today to talk a little bit about, let me go to the next slide. There we go. Is it working? Sorry, figuring out the webinar here. How do I, next. So do I just, okay. Oh, you're going to, okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're here today to talk about, first of all, we want to thank you for being an external reviewer for the Neighborhoods Ready for School request for proposal process. Today we're just going to give you a little bit about the overview of Neighborhoods Ready for School, the strategy, and we're also going to talk about the proposal review process and answer any questions you may have. And as we mentioned earlier, this will be recorded and put up on our website, and we'll send you out a link no later than Monday. And if you have questions, following this as you're reviewing, you can feel free to contact me. I'll also put my information on the website as well, so you'll be able to contact me to ask questions. Karen, you want to mention?
The link will be sent out by Tuesday. Monday is a holiday.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Monday's a holiday, so by Tuesday. Thanks. All right, so let's get started. Just a brief introduction to First Five. I think most people are aware of First Five in Alameda County, but we always give this overview. So we receive our funding from Proposition 10, which was passed in 1998, and it's a tobacco tax of 50% per pack or on all tobacco products sold in California, and 80% goes to the counties and 20% goes to the state commission. And every county has their own strategic plan to direct their use of their funds, and funds can only be used to benefit children birth to 5 and their families, and we have a very strong focus on accountability. So this is one of our new strategies, the Neighborhoods Ready for School, in our new strategic plan, which we are just now implementing in 2017. And what's different about this strategic plan is we have an even stronger focus on equity. We're placing stronger emphasis on targeting neighborhoods that have historically lacked infrastructure, and have been, historical disinvestment. And this particular strategy is really an evolution of the past work that we've been doing for the last, 18 years, where we've had a lot of programs going on in neighborhoods, in communities, and, in parks and libraries. And this is really the next evolution of that work, trying to really bring those programs together and provide more coordination and more parent and community partnership, and really ensure that families are getting what they need in their neighborhoods. And so a little bit about Neighborhoods Ready for School. These are just some of the general goals of the strategy. As I mentioned, with this emphasis on equity, we want to make sure that we're better serving the comprehensive needs of families, particularly their basic needs. So a stronger emphasis on making sure that they get linked to social services, housing, the things that are, the real needs that families are needing in their communities. And that there's also a really strong need for more policy and systems change that's driven from the neighborhood, that's really driven from the needs of the families and communities. And so this grant is designed to address these systems barriers and disparities in these underserved communities by building a network of early childhood services and community supports. Currently, providers aren't always connected, and they don't know what's available for families out there. And so this is really trying to aim to build stronger relationships between providers so they can start to align their resources and make better referrals to families. There's also currently a lack of early childhood spaces in communities, so families can gather and learn, have fun together. And so there's really a need for more funding to build this infrastructure in neighborhoods. So this is another thing the strategy is hoping to do. We also want to increase coordination, which means we want to provide a one-stop shop for families. As we've gone out into the community and asked families what they need, this is something they've always asked for, is to make it easier to get what they need by just, oh, someone just call in? Okay. Welcome to the webinar.
Hi, it's Sandy.
Hi, Sandy. You're the only person on the call right now, but feel free to jump in and ask questions, or you can also just type it in the little thing on the webinar. And we're being recorded too, just so you know.
Okay, is that Lisa?
Yeah, it's Lisa and Karen and Carla and June are in the room. But I'm going to sound a little official because it's being recorded and it'll be up on the website, just so you know. But thanks for reviewing for us, Sandy. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I the process. I absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, great. I was on. Oh, and we also are really working to increase family leadership and civic engagement opportunities, which means that, hold on here, we want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for families to increase their leadership skills and learn about ways that they can influence policies at all levels of government. And we also are interested in developing career pathways for families. So just as an example, if there's a family that might be teaching in a playgroup, or working or participating in a playgroup, there might actually be opportunities where they could eventually become a teacher of that playgroup. Or if they're participating in a parent cafe, they could eventually become a table host. So it's really thinking about how to build their leadership skills and move them into potential careers. That would be the ultimate goal, and linking them to the civic engagement and leadership opportunities there as well. And so now on to funding details. This is just a little bit, some of the details about how the grants are going to work. We have maximum of 4 grants up to $470,000 each. It's a 16-month initial contract term. It's, again, as I mentioned, intended to align and coordinate resources and programs. It may be used for planning. So this isn't necessarily a planning grant like some grants are, but they can use some, and you'll see in some of the applications that you review that some folks are articulating that planning process within their applications. And then the successful grantees, we do intend to continue to fund them through the full strategic plan through 2021. There's also a 20% match requirement, which we'll talk about more when we talk about the infrastructure and budget. And eventually, in the years 2021, First Five will begin to reduce the contribution by 10% per year, with the hope that that will help encourage the sustainability of this investment within neighborhoods. And we will also be assisting them with that sustainability, so working with the neighborhoods around fund development, leveraging funding to make sure that these aren't, this isn't just a 4-year grant, but that we can sustain these investments in the neighborhoods. All right, so now we're going to get into the actual request for proposal. And just to mention the way it's organized, in the first part of the proposal, there's the background and information. And then the second part is broken up into the actual application. So it's kind of 2 parts. So what I'm going to do is I'll reference, if you have the request for proposal in front of you, that would make it easy for you to reference. And I'm going to kind of show you where these different sections are in the pages of the proposals as we walk through. And I'll talk a little bit about what we're looking for, and then talk about a little about the scoring. So, sorry, go back to the map. Okay. Let's see here. All right. So as part of the first step in our process is we had to identify the neighborhoods for which we wanted to focus, and so that's included on page 11 of the background and information. And there were 9 zip codes that we identified that were going to be our priority zip codes. And the different indicators that we use to identify these zip codes are all included on page 11. So I'm not going to walk through all of them. There's many indicators and ways that we went through determining these 9 priority zip codes, but this gives you a little bit of background about how we landed there. And just so you know, all of the applications are included in these zip codes. So you don't have to worry about determining if they fall in these zip codes. They all do. And then the other piece, you want to go to the next slide, June? Thank you. Our priority population. So in addition to the zip codes, we're also looking for applications that are focusing on these priority populations listed here. And we want to know that as our, within their application, that the model that they're proposing really works specific to the neighborhoods and families, and that you can really get a sense from their application that they understand the unique challenges and assets of the residents in the neighborhood. So we're really looking for these host organizations to have a really strong understanding of their neighborhoods and the people living in their neighborhoods. And that the approach will actually support children's school readiness. And there's a plan to engage the multicultural families, and that plan is realistic. So experience and approach. So this is really the bulk of the application and the model. And so what I'll do is I'm going to walk through all 4 of these components and talk a little bit about what we're looking for in the application. There's a template that's included on page 24 of the grant application. And this template recognizes that some of the applicants will already have some of these components. And so the template says that they can describe their current efforts. And then what we're asking for is for them to describe their current efforts and then talk about what particular elements they want to use the funding to build. So that template lays that out. And we also want them to articulate how they will be raising any additional funds for each of these components and who their partners might be to reach these areas. So the first component is family leadership and opportunities and civic engagement. Here we want to be sure that families are involved in the planning and the shaping and implementing of the programs and resources in their neighborhoods. So we want to know that the programs and services delivered come from the needs identified by the families who are being served, and the families are actually involved in the delivery of these programs and services. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to be sure that families are connected to a wide variety of civic engagement and leadership opportunities, which will require the anchor organization to be pretty knowledgeable about what opportunities are out there in their communities. And First Five will also be supporting them in learning about those opportunities as well. Let's see. Second, the component around coordination, navigation, and location of programs and services. This is really what I mentioned earlier around a one-stop shop concept. We want to be sure that we're building a user-friendly system that includes family navigation to a wide variety of resources such as housing, social services, early childhood mental health, and early care and education. And the third component is the early childhood programs and services. And this component is broken up into 4 areas: social connections, family education and capacity building, caregiver and child play and learning activities. And now I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of each. So the social connections for families are examples of these could be community events, support groups, parent cafes. The family education and capacity building might be providing evidence-based programs like Abriendo Puertas or Incredible Years, or developing child development classes or workshops. It might also be population-specific programming like fatherhood support programs. And then last, the caregiver, child and play learning activities might be play groups, literacy groups, or school readiness workshops. And then the fourth component is economic resources and financial supports. And this component is broken up into 2 categories. One is the emphasis around neighborhoods, so providing those economic resources and financial supports for neighborhoods, and the other one is for families. So the neighborhood examples might be addressing poverty and affordable housing and job training or small business development within the neighborhood. And for families, it could be really linking them or referring them to resources such as housing, legal support, job training, or tax support, something like a VITA site within their neighborhoods. Okay, so those are the 4 components. Now we're going to move into the underlying pieces underneath, which are the partnerships and infrastructure. So the partnerships, and again, I'm just going to let you know that the partnership, you can reference the background on page 14. And then the template that that the grantees need to complete, or applicants need to complete, is on page 25 of the grant application. So developing a successful Neighborhoods Ready for School model is built upon partnerships with other providers and community stakeholders to ensure that families have access to a full suite of programs and services. So in other words, it's impossible to provide the comprehensive resources to families without having partners. So within this partnership template, is that us or, sorry, hold on a minute, we're having a little technical difficulty. Sorry, we lost you all, but we're back up and running. All right, so I was talking about partnerships, which is section 4 of the application, and there's a template there, as I mentioned, that applicants will need to complete. where it includes their agencies they intend to collaborate with, the role of those agencies, the overall partner agency budget, and any match or contribution and the type of match. So that's what the template includes. We also ask that they provide a description of their planned collaborative structure and give us a bit of information about what kind of experience they have with subcontracting. And then lastly, we want to see copies of their MOUs with their partners. And so they should have MOUs for all of those partners listed on the templates. There should be an MOU for those partners. And in the scoring, I'm not going to read through all the scoring criteria because you have that in the RFP document. But do want to emphasize that we're looking for that the partners have a strong alignment with the needs of the neighborhood and the planned roles of the partners are realistic, and that the collaborative structure is detailed. They have experience with subcontracting, and have, as I mentioned, they have their signed MOUs with each partner agency. A few more things to keep in mind. We aren't mandating specific partnerships, but competitive applicants will have the partners identified to offer all of those components that I just mentioned, those 4 components. So a wide variety of partners to make sure that families have that suite of programs and resources. And that the MOU ideally would allow for some data sharing and evaluation and reporting to support the program design and coordination. And the model should also have the cross-sector collaborative of service providers and community members. This is a little tricky because we understand that this might take some time to develop, but their plan should be realistic around this. And this is another area where First Five will be able to help support them help them develop their collaborative structure. And on to the next component, which is infrastructure. So there's a lot in this component here. So again, you can reference the background and information on page 15 of the RFP, and then the application is page 26 and 27 for these sections. So this is a really unique part of the Neighborhoods Ready for School strategy, where we really want to emphasize a strong infrastructure in these neighborhoods. And so the key elements of this infrastructure include staffing, facilities, and budget. So within the staffing component, First Five is defining staffing as a realistic level of staffing is no fewer than 3 full-time equivalent staff that are grant funded or provided through a match. And some of the key roles are agency leadership, so they have oversight of the programming that's happening in the neighborhood, navigation, outreach, and parent leadership, but there's someone there to really hold the entire strategy or project together. And there's outreach and organizing. So to ensure that these particular target populations that are identified in the application are really being reached, that there's actually staff identified to go out and do this community outreach and spend time making sure that the target populations are reached. There's also staff for family navigation to ensure that families have an array of services and supports, including identifying needs, but also guiding them through the actual application for public benefits and programs and support. So not just referring them, but helping them fill out applications, following up, and making sure that they actually get what they need. So really walking them through the whole process of getting what they need. And then there's also a piece around data tracking and performance reporting. So Neighborhoods Ready for School has a strong evaluation component, and it is going to require staff to help us collect data and track how things are working and really work on that evaluation piece of this project. And lastly, that there's a need for administrative support. In order to have a lot of programs and services and outreach in these communities, we need help with logistics and operations, planning the community events, and planning schedules. So within the scoring rubric, what's emphasized is that the staffing plan is realistic, and that the staff reflect the neighborhoods being served, and their experience fit with their assigned roles. So that's staffing. Now we're going to move on to the facility and environment. So within the background and information section of the RFP, we outline the ideal facility as that the facility would include an area for programming. So there's a place to actually have these activities for children and families, a space big enough for families to really learn and gather together. There's also office space for partners and staff, and there might be a private space for families to relax and recharge or receive services and supports while their children are cared for in the play area. So this would be the ideal space. We recognize they might have that, not right away, but we are asking them to provide us with a plan. And so in the application, they're asked to provide a maximum of 2 pages of a description of what their facility plan will look like or what their existing facilities are to meet the ideal facility needs. And in the scoring rubric, we emphasize that their plans need to meet the needs of the model and that they provide a welcoming space for children and families. So next, on to the budget and match. There are 2 Excel spreadsheet templates that are included in the application that they need to provide us with. Just to let you know, not all of the applicants use these templates. And so when you're scoring the budgets, just emphasize what's included in the scoring criteria. You don't need to worry about the template or the format that they provided. Just focus on what's in the scoring rubric. And in the scoring rubric, what is emphasized is that the budget is detailed and realistic, and each line item is justified and it supports the model described. And if you have questions about the budget line items, there is a detailed description of all the different budget line item possibilities within the RFP application document for reference. And then applicants must provide a 20% match, and the matches can include in-kind contributions like staff or facilities or equipment, or grants, or contributions from partner agencies and earned revenue. The admin indirect can be up to 15%. And there's something about supplementation that I want to mention here, something unique to First Five. So, where's the bullet? Sorry, I just lost my place here. Sorry.
Third green bullet.
Thank you. Okay. So by law, First Five funding may not be used to supplant other funds. This can be a little confusing, but basically what this means is that if there's a current staff person already employed at the agency, First Five funding can't be used to supplant that existing staff. But if you're confused by that, don't worry about it. First Five staff will be looking through those budgets in more detail, and we can help out with the supplementations. But just know that is something that is unique to First Five funds. All right. And lastly, there is a question on in their application around measuring progress and evaluation. And what we're looking for here is that there's a current proposed plan for measuring progress and performance for continuous quality improvement, and that the evaluation that they have, they thought about staff to implement their plan. So we just want to make sure that they have a process and then their staff to actually implement what that process might look like. And just to also, we'll talk about a little bit later, is that this is another area where First Five is going to provide a lot of support, because we're currently implementing results-based accountability, and we are planning to have these neighborhoods report in that using RBA, and so we're going to be doing a lot of support around them, learning about RBA and doing their evaluation in that way. All right. So on to capacity building. Not going to go too much in depth around here, but it might help as you read these applications to know that First Five will be supporting these applicants in many different ways. One is learning communities. We don't know exactly what the learning communities will look like, but we're going to wait to find out what the needs of our particular neighborhoods will be, and then we will develop learning communities where we'll bring all the neighborhoods together to learn together in certain areas. Some areas might be around, early childhood programming. As you'll read some of these applications, not everyone has the same expertise around early childhood, or it could be financial support and economic resources. But we'll have to kind of see where the gaps are and then develop learning communities around that. We also want to make sure that our First Five programs and investments are integrated within these neighborhoods, such as Help Me Grow and our early care and education quality programs. And it's also our role to make sure that they understand the early childhood systems. The early childhood system is complicated, it's siloed, many different partners, and so we're here to help them understand that. We're going to provide lots of technical assistance throughout the 4 years that we're working with applicants. And as I mentioned before, they will be learning about results-based accountability, and fundraising and sustainability will be helping with that as well. So at this point, Sandy, I think you're still the only person on the call. Do you have any questions? Can you hear me? She might not be on anymore. Sandy, are you still there?
Sorry, I muted it because I coughed for a moment.
No worries. Just let me know. Do you have any questions before I move on?
Yeah, I just gave you 5. No, just joking. No, I think it's pretty clear and very very outlined.
Okay.
So when you said the criteria, just pay attention to the criteria in the budget. You mean in those bullets in the scoring rubric under infrastructure?
Yes, exactly. And
okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's scoring exactly that criteria. And then on page, I'm just going to tell you, there's under the background, there's a list of the budget categories, which might also help. Sorry, I'm finding that page. Do you have it there, Karen? For reference, which is on, sorry, hold on a minute here. The budget it should be on page 15.
At the bottom
Yeah.
of page 15.
Yeah, that was what it was. Yeah, the bottom of page 15, and then there's also, sorry, hold on. Within their grant application, there's also a list of, on page 26, sorry, that took a while. On page 26, there's a list of the different line items as well that you can reference for the budget.
Yeah. So I'm looking at that, and that only raises, there's a little question that raises for me.
Okay.
That with regard to the match, the criteria scoring 1 to 5 include at least a 20% budget match. That can really vary. So just in general, as long as the match, it doesn't matter if it's all in kind or whether it's contributions from partner agencies, you're just looking at really whether or not their commitment for the match, how strong that commitment is. I guess I'm wondering, scoring that from 1 to 5, is there any preference or anything that's criteria beyond just 20% identified? I guess the strength of the commitment do you care whether or not it's all in kind or contributions are identified?
No.
How is it tricky?
That's a good question, Sandy, and no, we do not care. We did not. So it's really exactly what's in the scoring criteria, just reference that. That's it right there. What's bulleted out, where it says it includes at least a 20% budget match. They get 0 points for less than 20%. So that basically disqualifies them. I don't think you're going to see that. We would have already, yeah.
We went through and made sure that all applications.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then if it's greater than 25%, that would be a 5. So just use that criteria and we should be good. But we didn't specify preference versus in-kind or contribution, financial contribution.
Then Sandy, this is Carla, and I think though as a reviewer, when you have your comments or when we deliberate, if that's a question you want to raise about strength or type of match or what it means in terms of commitment, I think that's where the discussion will happen with your fellow reviewers. But use the strict definitions and then bring that up as part of your conversation.
That's good that you do have that process, because between 1 and 20 is a range, and so we'll just have that. I guess that will also get worked out with the conversation there.
Yeah. But that's a good question. I would imagine that other people will have that question as well around the match. So thank you. Any other questions before we move on to the process of review?
Okay.
No?
No, I'm good.
All right. Great. All right, so now I'm just going to provide, I'm going to move to the next slide, June, a quick overview of just kind of where we are in the timeline and the process. Just so you all know, we had a letter of interest process before the RFP, and we received 19 LOIs that were due on October 20th, and we reviewed those LOIs and invited 8 agencies to submit a full proposal, and those proposals were due on December 22nd. And so now we're in the process of reviewing those proposals, and then we're going to have the January 31st meeting, which you all know about, that we're going to talk more about in the slides that I'm going to go through. And then after that the community review panel, we're going to bring the recommendations of the review panel to First Five leadership to First Five leadership, and then in February, the First Five leadership will be providing the funding recommendation to the First Five Alameda County Commission for approval. And the funding recommendations will be based on the scores, the geographic distribution, and balance across funding priorities. So it's the community review panel, and the community review panel will then go to the First Five leadership, and then from leadership it will go to the commission. So that's how the overall process is going to work. So now getting into just briefly around the roles and responsibilities of external reviewers. I think everyone has already identified their conflicts of interest and they're abiding by the confidentiality oath, but just wanted to put that out there that that's something that we'll have, that everyone needs to be aware of as we move through the process. We are asking that everyone thoughtfully and objectively review each assigned application, and you're asked to review 8 applications unless you have a conflict. So you were only given the applications that you do not have a conflict for. And it will take about 2 hours per application. And use, as I kind of went through some of that background information, please reference the background and information and scoring criteria to really anchor your scoring decisions. And then bring your note sheets to the deliberation on January 31st to remind you of your initial assessment. And also bring the printed applications. Basically, any notes, any writing that you do throughout your scoring and review process, bring to that deliberation, because some of those will be shredded and others we will need for because everything is going to be, it's public domain, so we need to have all those documents. Thank you. So the scoring rubric, just a little overview of the scoring rubric. It's a way that we're aiming to get a systemic way to review to score these applications across the applicant pool. And reviewers will be evaluating whether applications are weak, sufficient, and strong. So those are the 3 main categories. And we'd really appreciate it if you were able to give us the reviewer comments about the specific strengths and weaknesses, because as we debrief with applicants that aren't funded or asked to move forward, we do use these comments to help us debrief with applicants. So please, as much as you can, include those strengths and weaknesses in your notes. And as I mentioned, bring those completed note sheets to the deliberation for reference. And then one other suggestion is that you might write in pencil, because as we're deliberating and discussing, you might want to change your score based on what you're learning and throughout the discussion. So it might be good to write those in pencil.
Can I just add that
please do, Karen.
When we do summarize your comments, or when we take your comments, we summarize them and they're anonymous. So.
Oh, I think I was going to
sorry.
mention that later, but that's great. So on to here we go. So a few more review tips. So the budget, like I said, there's 2 template documents that were included in the application. Some of the applicants did not use the budget templates. Don't worry about that. You don't need to, penalize them for not using the templates. Just focus on what's in that scoring criteria under the budget criteria outlined in the rubric. Also, applicants should not be penalized if the order of what they provide in the application doesn't reflect what's in the RFP. Also, some applicants included the question before their narrative and what they describe. Don't penalize if they don't include the question. And lastly, some of the applicants provided a lot of supplemental information that weren't required as part of the application. We didn't actually give reviewers all that supplemental information. So if in their applications they're referencing something that you don't have, don't penalize them for that because we didn't actually include, give it to all the reviewers. There was a lot. And so in the interest of, respecting your time and everything, we didn't want you to have to review a huge pile of supplemental information in addition to what we're already asking you to do. So keep that in mind. Okay, on to the facilitated deliberation process. So again, it's going to be January 31st from 4:30 to 7. Please be on time because it's going to be we have a lot to discuss, a packed agenda. So please come on time and come prepared to discuss the strengths and concerns and contribute as a content expert. So there's a reason why we asked you to review. Obviously, your expertise is really needed in this process. So we're looking forward to hearing your opinions. And then we will finalize the scores as a group and develop a group ranking from 1 to 8. And that ranking then will be brought to the first 5 leadership team. So that's how it's going to happen. And as I mentioned, Karen also said this, but just to mention it again, that this is all public information, so keep that in mind as you're writing down your comments. And that names won't be included on the note sheets, but that it is public information who is a reviewer. So that is something that we would need to share with the public. So just keep that in mind as you're scoring and writing down notes. All right. So more about the deliberation process. I think I already said this, but the final scores and rankings will be brought to first 5 agency leadership. And the first 5 agency leadership team will then review the funding recommendations and make the final determination of which 4 applicants will then be presented to the commission. And then I think this is the last slide, which is just the external reviewer next steps. I think all of you have received by now your packets, your FedEx, the actual applications for you to review. And all of those materials are also on the Dropbox, which has been emailed to you. The detailed instructions were emailed to you as well. And if you haven't received any of those things, we will include, you should have information about how to contact us. You have our Neighborhoods Ready for School email. We will also send out another email with a webinar link, and you can, just ask us at any time if you're missing any of this information. And then lastly, just to, once again, to bring the completed note sheets to the deliberation on January 31st. And the address is there, and we are excited to see you on time on January 31st. And that's it. Just questions. Sandy, any other questions? Oh, and the webinar link, again, is right there, but we'll send the recording out to everybody.
Is the conference room in the back or the front?
Oh, good question. It's in the front. So super easy. As you walk in the front doors, the conference room is right to your right. And we'll be out there welcoming everybody.
Okay, great.
Anything else, Carla, Karen, you want to add?
No, great job. Thank you, Sandy.
Thanks, Sandy.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, all of you.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.